I'm trying to record on this computer. I think this is happening.
Excellent. So thank you, Aaron, for making the recording, and we will catch up later on how to get that posted.
Sure.
And Michelle Nurali is going to be our host today, so I'm going to hand this over to Michelle. Thank you very much, Michelle.
Hi, everyone. It's March 9th, 2017. Welcome to the Kubernetes community meeting. Thank you, Jason, for volunteering to take notes. We'll go ahead and get started with release updates. So I'll hand it off to Dan Gillespie for our updates on 1.6.
All right, how's it going, everyone? So the release train keeps going, and here to give an update. So we've been putting out these no-go-go status reports, and currently we are in a no-go state, so as in we're not currently ready to make a release right now. The things that are preventing that from happening is there's still bugs existing in the 1.6 milestone on GitHub. There's still flakes existing, and you can see the breakdown by SIG, as well as the changes from yesterday. There's still some SIGs that should try to get some of those out of the milestone. And some have done a really good job at trying to get rid of it. But we should just keep the push going on trying. If there's a flake that's in the milestone that hasn't flaked in a very long time, we should remove it. Otherwise, we should decide whether this is a release blocking flake, and that decision should be made at the SIG level. Additionally, there's still unstable tests, SKU test failures, and upgrade test failures, which are in the process of being worked on. And Eeyore is here with the features update.
Yeah, so just a brief update from me. We have 29 features at the moment that are tracked in 1.6. We are in the process of final grooming of them. I would also share my respect to people who are who have updated the actual status of the features with the release notes and with the documentation. And this is also the call for the other feature owners who haven't yet done that. So please update the spreadsheet, the feature spreadsheet, with your release notes and with the release notes and with the documentation before Monday. And that's all from me.
And I think that's it for 1.6.
Thank you so much. So for 1.5, Marcin is unable to join us, so I'll just go ahead and read his points. He says that 1.5.4 was released on Tuesday, and next up is 1.5.5, approximately somewhere between March 17th and 20th is when we can expect that. Okay, and for 1.4 is Just Frizzell here. I don't see her. Okay, great. So we'll just see if Brendan's around for his demo. Brendan, are you available?
I have not gotten an answer back from him yet, so.
Okay, no worries.
Zoom is hating me. He will be joining though.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so let's go into SIG updates. SIG scheduling is up first. Tim, are you around?
Yep, can you hear me?
Okay. Yes, I can. Take it away, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I'm just going to do a brief overview of the high-level items for 1.6. Right now, we're currently in sort of lockdown for 1.6 release, so folks are looking at flakes. They're also looking at bugs, and there's a couple of documentation items that are still remaining. The highlights for the 1.6 release, the biggest thing to note is the promotion from alpha to beta for a series of API modifications. Klaus had worked on the multi-scheduling promotion. Avesh and Merrick had made changes to taints and toleration, so that should be in beta stage. Rob and myself had made changes to node and pod affinity, and also added a flag gate for the GKE folks so they can turn on support for the alpha annotations should they need to for a transition period. During the 1.6 release, there was a lot of cleanup work on code coverage. I know a lot of the folks from IBM had helped out there, so many thanks. There's a new Googler that's been spinning up this release cycle. Bobby Summit, I believe is how you say his last name. So he's going to be helping David Oppenheimer along the way and helping with reviews and whatnot. Some other highlights for the 1.6 release is that there's been an assorted amount of cleanup to be able to convey meaningful information when your pod is not scheduled. Jade did a lot of work there. There's been some modifications to add features to the scheduler extender. And lastly, during this release cycle, there was a lot of effort to clean up the backlog and queue of items such that we can broaden the tent so we can have more folks contributing it and being able to plug into the SIG scheduling in a meaningful way. Right now, there's contributions from Google, Red Hat, IBM, Intel, Huawei, Heptio, and other folks. I think a biggest pain point, which kind of could lead into Brendan's talk a little bit later, is that as these new folks try to come online, there's so much documentation and so much information. They just want to go from zero to making a contribution, so it's a little difficult for them to understand the minutia of how the community works. They also have had a lot of pain with rebases and having enough people to review their changes. So that's kind of the overall picture of SIG scheduling for the 1.6 release. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask them. And I'll probably let other folks go now.
Thanks, Tim. Does anybody have any quick questions for Tim? Okay, great. All right, so Aaron from SIG Testing is up next. Aaron, are you around?
I am. Although apparently I'm called SIG Scale right now, but trust me, I'm totally Aaron. So I dropped a bunch of links in the meeting notes. I don't feel the need to present this, so I hope folks know how to find the meeting notes and click through if they want to. So I would say the broad message from SIG testing lately is we're trying to figure out how to get some accountability for test flakiness. And we're trying to tackle this in a couple different ways. The number one thing is it seems like we put in this test owners.csv file, which should auto-assign issues based on like who was an owner of that test if the test flaked. And we're finding that those people aren't really responsive. So we have a proposal out to, if nothing else, try and assign to SIGs instead of individuals and potentially like restructure the tests so that the package structure sort of more closely mirrors the SIG structure. I'm not sure if we're over Conway lawing this or not, but that's, that's a proposal that we're looking for comments on. So a couple cool things that the group has put together to sort of help us out here. There are many short aliases available at go.cates.io. So we have an on-call URI where you can see who's on call right now, who's the build cop, and who the release team is. You can go to the test history URI, which will tell you the tests that have flaked the most in the past 24 hours, and which suites have flaked in the past 24 hours most frequently. And we're currently experimenting with a sort of alternate view of this data. We're calling it, I guess, like a triage board where instead of focusing on like which test is failing, focus on the cause of the failure and see how many tests that cause is happening across. It's super cool. You can drill down. There are a bunch of graphs. We're really looking forward to presenting this a little bit more actively to the release burn down team to help us sort of triage out which flakes are affecting us the most. And then, of course, I definitely want to give a shout out to, if anybody doesn't know that the testgrid.cates.io site exists, it does, and there's a lot of really useful data there. I am lacking the email link. I'll find it right now. But Morgan Bauer sort of posted a really helpful Q&A sort of thing where he tried to actually use the site extensively and discovered a lot of its features. Had a couple questions, and that's the closest thing we have to a manual for that site right now. But it's seriously like you can go through and see like which tests across which providers flaked the most against a given day, or like how long they lasted. And again, I'm super like enthused that we can see this in the community, because it was something that, you know, Brian Grant had to hold up his laptop to a webcam a couple months ago. So that's good progress. And we also have summary tabs now. So we're trying to sort of make that site a little bit more authoritative in terms of go, no go signals. And we would welcome feedback on what could make that more useful. Just sort of an incidental thing. I'm not sure how many people are really interested or familiar with the sausage making of how we test stuff, but there is a good bit of Jenkins involved, and we've been trying to remove as much of that as possible. So for a good while, we've been using this program called Prow, which you know, helps us sort of, given a GitHub event, do a thing, and it's we're really close to using Kubernetes to test Kubernetes on Kubernetes with all the Kubernetes. Can I say Kubernetes anymore? So we're really enthusiastic about that. And then the other thing I guess I'll talk about is Brendan has made a proposal about sort of test flakiness and whether or not we want to, you know, start gating the submit queue on this. And I think this sort of gets to a broader, I don't have a bullet point for this, but I just want to sort of put out there the ethos or the concept that perhaps we have way too many end-to-end tests, and we could definitely test the same logic at the unit level or the integration level. And we're really interested in figuring out how to have this conversation with the right people, with the right SIG owners. But in the meantime, we're very strong proponents of this idea of shutting down the submit queue if the flakiness is way too high. So I'm not sure that we're necessarily going to be the champions or implementers of this, but I think that Brendan's proposal, which I believe, yes, I have linked in the meeting notes, like, is a very strong indicator of where we would like this project to head for the 1.7 release. And I'm done brain dumping. Any questions?
So I'm happy to drive that forward as we've seen before. I think we've actually reached a place where there's enough consensus that we're going to merge it and we're going to build out the signal, and maybe we'll run it for a week and say like, hey, this is what the data says, and now we're going to start, you know, closing down the queue, or maybe we'll just start with the queue closed down. Joe Finney did a great little hack together script from which the low bar, and I mean, I think it's probably a very low bar, is that 38% of all PRs get a flake that is not related to that PR. And I suspect it's actually way higher than that, but I think nobody believes that that's okay. And so that's a really good place to start from, and we'll just track and we'll make it better over time. So that's where
Iteration is our friend.
I guess the other thing I would say about what you said is, like, historically, we've always felt like integration tests would be a good thing, and test command sort of does that some, but we've just never had a good framework. And so I think the reason that a lot of the testing has ended up in EDE testing is because EDE is where we have the most robust framework for things that are bigger than unit tests. I think
slowest, flakiest, most robust framework, right?
Well, that's from a program.
We really need to consider the concept of code coverage here. I'm not sure how actively that's been paid attention to.
No, I agree with that too. I mean, a long-standing project, if anybody's looking for a cool project, a long-standing project that I've wanted to do is basically build an HTTP proxy that measures RESTful API coverage. Basically, take our Swagger schema and proxy requests through, and you can basically build up this like API coverage metric. Nobody's ever done it, but it would be really a useful, interesting thing to do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I also agree with Aaron that we need, you know, we have a lot of E2E tests. It's a lot of cargo culting. We need to get more focused tests that, run faster and are less flaky. And there are a lot of benefits to doing that.
Yeah.
Just a quick comment. One, I think you're absolutely right. I think there's massive amounts of overlapping testing, and we could, by looking at coverage, we could systematically reduce that. The other observation is, if we can't write reliable tests against the Kubernetes API, then in all likelihood, people cannot write reliable applications against the Kubernetes API. So there's a kind of validation value in that.
That's true. And I agree that there are a bunch of known problems that make it hard.
Strongly,
We shouldn't be working around them in the E2E test framework.
strongly agree with all of that. So I'm putting this opinion out there. There's maybe a broader conversation to have about sort of project policy and how we want to gate things and whether or not SIG testing should be in charge of all of that. But it's encouraging to hear that we're not alone in thinking like, while we're trying to optimize the problem of super flaky E2E tests that exercise the entire system, maybe we could get more reliable signal faster with integration and unit tests. I think that's something we should continue to discuss. The last thing I just want to point out there is, because I'm encouraged to hear that people care about this, a great place for this discussion to continue would be the SIG testing Slack channel on Kubernetes, or the SIG testing mailing list on Google Groups. And we also meet weekly Tuesdays at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Aaron, for your SIG testing update. Brendan, since you're around and your audio is working, do you want to go ahead and jump into your demo?
Sure. Hopefully screen sharing will work too. This will be the adventure. Oh, that's the other part. Can you see that?
Sure can.
All right, cool. So one of the things I've been thinking a lot about lately is basically how can we accelerate the PR process, especially for small PRs. A lot of people get small PRs that are that add a lot of load, but mostly because of the flow of like finding it, opening it, clicking on it, going through it. Like there's a lot of automation that we can add. And so to that end, I've built up this bulk LGTM tool that people may have seen before, but I wanted to give a quick demo of it. With an idea that this is, at this point, basically ready to go onto the submit queue. So it uses GitHub authentication, and it uses it in a cookie form so that multiple users can be on here at the same time with different authentication, and you only get the privileges that are associated with your credentials. So this is basically what it looks like. I can go over here to log in. I've actually already logged into GitHub, so it's just going to do the OAuth flow, and you won't actually see the GitHub login page. But if I hadn't already logged into GitHub, it would go through the GitHub login OAuth page. But now it sees that it knows this is me, and it's actually doing some diffing in the background. And so now you can see here, I have this diff here that's +0 lines, -2 lines, obviously a link to the actual PR if I'm interested in it. I can go here and I can look at this. I don't know if Yuju is on the line, but is this one good to LGTM and approve? Anyone else? Anyone have any feelings? Go ahead and do it. So we can actually click on the LGTM plus approve button. And so now if we go over here to that PR, what you'll see is, as I scroll down, scroll up. So it's added in LGTM and release note none in from using the GitHub APIs. And so at this point, that PR is LGTM'd. It's removed from here, and I can move on down. So I have a complete list here of small changes that I can run through, and this one looks pretty good too, so I'll approve that one. I can run through really quickly. It's kind of my goal was for people to have it be a 5-minute, hey, I need a break from coding. I'm just going to run through an LGTM a bunch of bulk PRs. They don't have to be assigned to you at the time. They get assigned to you in the meantime when you click the button. So that's about it. I'm going to work with the submit queue folks to get it up onto the main submit queue site because I think it's ready to go at this point. And so hopefully people will start using it. It works right now. You can run it as a Docker image on your own local dev box and just use it right now if you're interested. Obviously, that's a little bit uglier than having it up on the submit queue site. So, any questions?
I'd like to point out the first one you LGTM is probably going to block the most.
Is going to which?
Block the merge queue. That's one that was causing problems in KubeMark.
Ha. Well, it won't block the merge queue because if it doesn't pass.
No, KubeMark isn't queue blocking, but then it is anyway.
Isn't it right there? Isn't that KubeMark right there? Jenkins GCE KubeMark.
This was the one that failed the 500 and blocked a couple days ago. It's not.
Anyway, all right. Well, we need to make sure that all of that our merging is correct, right? This is only for the LGTM bits. It's not for the testing bits. I mean, if there's other information that people think is relevant and interesting to display, so that we can ensure that we only so that whoever's going through this process gets all of the correct information. I definitely welcome that feedback. It's up on Kubernetes/test infra. It's in the Munge GitHub space. So, anything else?
Very cool. Thanks for doing this.
No, it's no problem at all. Michelle, do you want me to go on to phase 2 of what I want to talk about, or?
Absolutely, go for it.
Right. Let's disconnect over there. And so phase 2 of what I want to talk about is the results of the community survey. I apologize for presenting this via the forums interface. I tried to put it into a pretty PowerPoint, but you have to go through a spreadsheet and the data got messed up. I think I'm going to package it up as a CSV plus Jupyter notebook so that anybody who wants to play around with this thing can use Jupyter to break it out however they feel like breaking it out, and we'll distribute that Docker image and people can just run it themselves. But to start out, and please interrupt at any time if you have questions. I'm going to run through this. So we got 315 responses, which is great. The bulk of the people were all Kubernetes users, so 70% of people said they were a Kubernetes user. There's obviously, you could check more than one box. So 50% people said they were an operator. 40-ish% said they were developers, and a few of the other roles. So people in general who are answering the survey were pretty heavily involved in the community. It's a pretty even split between people who have been involved for less than 1 year, people who've been involved for 1 to 2 years. That's the majority of people. That's not a surprise. And then about 20% of people who I'd say are longtime members of the community. Again, sadly, I haven't broken out responses based on time in the community. I think that would be a really interesting thing to look at if somebody wants to do the analysis, or eventually I'll get there as well. Again, we see a great deal of engagement from people. So, 60%, 65% of people have asked a question on Slack or Stack Overflow. 50% of people have answered a question. So I like to see that, because it means people are not just asking for help, but they're actually helping others as well. I think that's a real sign of a healthy community. Lots of people have filed or commented on issues. That's also not a shock to people. We have a lot of issues. And then, people who have participated in Kubernetes meetups as well is a very high percentage. I think that, again, points to the strength of the community that we have. Now getting into sort of the more substantive data, this is the first question we asked. I have a clear understanding of where the Kubernetes project is going. I would say that this is largely positive. So we have, roughly 75% of people have some level of agreement between about where the project is going. I think it's a little bit problematic that 25% of people are either unsure or disagree that 10% of people in the community don't know where the project is going. That probably is something that we need to work on. Although, as we'll see as we go down, there's more things to work on. On the flip side, however, it's really great to see that basically everybody is either staying neutral or increasing their interest and enthusiasm for the project. So that's, again, a sign that we're healthy and in the right direction. Most everyone is either staying the same, and actually, honestly, most people are getting more excited by a large percentage. So that's something like 85% of people say that their enthusiasm has increased over the last year. So that's really fantastic. Any questions so far, or do you want me to just keep rolling?
Keep rolling.
All right, I'm gonna keep rolling. This is the beginning of what I think is maybe a little bit of a more of a concern, I would say. So 20% of folks, 25% of folks either are neutral or negative on different opinions are valued and listened to. I don't think, this can never be perfect, but this to me, I would like to see the different opinions graph look a little bit more like the enthusiasm graph. So I think this points to the fact that sometimes in our discourse, we don't, we're not always as even as we could be as we go forward. There's some data here. I haven't had a chance to go through the human responses. I think it's important to contrast the difference of the different opinions are valued and listened to graph with the I feel welcomed graph, right? So I think this actually points to a really strong community of people welcoming people in. I'd say 10% neutral. I'd still like to see that a little bit lower, but it's pretty good. And 3% of people who don't feel welcomed, that doesn't make me happy. But it's, I think, overall headed in the right direction and generally pretty good. But then I think we come back down and we see my contributions are valued in the Kubernetes community, and we see a real distinction there between, effectively everyone feels welcome, and then every one of the metrics goes down for the contributions being valued. And I think that this again speaks to a sense of a welcoming community, a sense of an exciting community, but possibly a community where not everybody feels like their contributions are welcome. And I think that's a problem that we need to work on. And then we get to the really challenging ones, I think, which is I understand how project decisions are made, right? And so here, it's good in the sense that, 40-ish% of people agree that at some level that they understand how project decisions are made, but an almost equal percentage of people, about 30% of people disagree that they understand, and about 25% are neutral, right? And I think this is a question where we shouldn't have people who are uncertain, right? This should really be a question of everybody basically understands how project decisions are made. And I think we've had a lot of governance discussions over the past few weeks, and I think that one of the things I'd like to highlight is and I put this on the issue, we're talking a lot about different roles. We're not necessarily talking as much about how people make decisions, and I think we should have a real conversation about how we believe canonically decisions should be made, and we should make sure that we follow by that process for all decisions. And then likewise, I understand how I can participate in the Kubernetes community. This is also, I think, a little bit negative, right? We have, 60% of people think that they understand how, but there's a large percentage of people who are active in the community, right? Remember, these are not strangers to the community. These are people who are active in the community, who are not sure how they should participate, right? And so I think that if you have people who are filing issues, if you have people who are sending PRs, who are answering questions on Slack, I would really hope that every single person agrees that they understand how to participate in the community. But I think these two graphs together really reflect the bulk of the work that we need to do, which is we need to give people better, more clear direction about how we make decisions and about how they can participate and help us make those decisions. All right, I'm gonna pause there. Any questions about this or thoughts?
Yeah, I think the graph about people's contributions being valued is related to these other two graphs because people can't easily find the best places for them to contribute to the project. This was much easier when the project was small and we could just have a discussion over Slack and figure out where people's strengths and interests were and direct them to valuable things that needed to get done. And the black hole of 5,000 issues that nobody has time to triage is part of the problem. But just the fact that the community is so sprawling and fragmented now makes it really hard to direct people to the right place.
Yeah, I would agree with that. And so I think that taking that as I think we've done a lot of work. I mean, I think I could argue that we had the exact same problem with the Kubernetes API and the Kubernetes getting started experience a while ago. And we, at one point, just basically decided that this was a problem that we had to fix. And we did a lot of work on intros and how-tos and all this kind of stuff. We probably need to do the same thing for our getting started with the developer and the
Yeah,
project.
this is why I've been begging for help on the developer docs, and we're also discussing building some kind of SDK for the API machinery to make it much easier to get started in building something new. And there have been discussions about documenting onboarding guides for different areas of the project, like for Quizlet or whatever. I think all those would be great.
I think this might be an area also where we should see if we can maybe lean on, because I think these are also projects that historically have been hard to get people to do. And so maybe this is a place where the CNCF or other kinds of, like, we can actually vendor this out, right? As a task for someone to take on for pay, as opposed to hoping that the community shows up.
Yeah, and there have been two challenges with that. One is I've had a huge amount of trouble getting people to be able to make progress when they don't actually understand the community and the processes already, especially since the problem is that they're not documented.
Yeah.
And the second is that so far CNCF hasn't offered enough money to get over the ramp-up time required for a vendor. Like, they're willing to pay for the ramp-up time, but not for doing any work after the ramp-up time.
So I'll pitch in here for a moment and say that I am actually hiring another community manager for Kubernetes, another person to do work similar to what I've been doing and what other Googlers and community members have been working on, sort of as a 20%. And the opening project for that person is going to be a onboarding program, because what's the best way to learn a community but work on onboarding things. And I also see that there are some volunteers in the chat, so I will go ahead and reach out and try to find anyone you want to recommend for a Kubernetes community manager process work within our community. That would be super helpful to me. And then B, I'll try and connect everyone to get more onboarding, even getting started before we get this person.
Yeah. Okay, that's great to hear, Sarah. All right, so that's that. I didn't want to end on the sad note, so we'll go down to slightly better. I'm able to be a productive Kubernetes developer. I think despite all of the concerns about tooling and everything else like that, this is a relatively positive graph. I mean, 25% of people don't think they can be productive, which clearly points to the fact that we have lots of issues that we need to work through, and that's true. But 75 or so % of people are neutral or positive, and over 50% of people are positive. Am I doing my math right? Close to 50% of people are positive. I think this graph could have been a lot worse. So there's work to do here, but I think we're doing. People are still managing to get their stuff done.
The other thing that's important in this is it's the first time we've done this survey, so this is our baseline. And I would bet if we'd asked I'm able to be a productive Kubernetes developer 3 or 6 months ago, that it would have been skewed lower. So the work that we've been doing has been changing this, and I would love to see this again in 3 months or 6 months.
Yes, and we do plan on doing this, and we actually also collected some longitudinal data from people voluntarily, so we can actually do individual correlations across time as well as the aggregates across time, and that will signal if we're moving in the right direction. And then the last piece, I'm able to successfully manage applications using Kubernetes. This is just a clean win, I think, right? So 10% of people, 5% of people, 6% of people are negative. And I think that's about as good as probably you're ever going to do, unless you really are perfect. 6% of people are neutral, and then 90% of people say they're able to successfully manage applications. I think this speaks a lot to the effort that we made in making this thing easier to use and the product as a whole. And likewise, so interesting statistic, most of you are not using a managed Kubernetes solution, 60-40. And then likewise, I'm able to effectively manage my Kubernetes cluster is similarly positive. It's not quite as positive as I can manage my apps, which I think speaks a little bit to some of the complexity that we're still trying to weigh down. But I think this is, again, like as Sarah said, like if we had asked this question 6 months ago, I doubt it would look anywhere near this positive. So I think this speaks a lot to the progress that we've made. So I think that's great as well. And that was it. And then just anything else you'd like to tell us? There was lots of positive stuff in here, so it was nice to see that as well. Again, I'm going to take this data. I'm going to strip out I'm going to basically hash the individual identifiers so that people's email addresses aren't broadcast across the internet. And then I'm going to put this in a Docker image hooked up to Jupyter so that people can do their own ad hoc analysis of the data. And also the spreadsheet's out there too, but honestly, I think the notebook is going to be easier for people to play around with than the spreadsheet, which is not as friendly. Any other last questions? I'm going to try and also put this together into a blog post. And so if anybody's interested in helping do the data analysis for that blog post, please let me know. It will help make that thing a lot better. And thank you to everybody who took the time to fill it out. And to a special shout out to Steve Francia. I don't know if he's on the line, but who spent a lot of time really helping improve the survey itself. I really, really appreciate it. So that's it. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thank you so much for sharing, Brennan. I have a quick question, Sarah and Brendan and Brian. If there are volunteers who are willing to help with this documentation effort and they're not on this call, should they go to the working group for ContribX, or should they reach out to y'all directly, or both?
Contributor experience is the right place.
Great.
Yeah, it's a SIG. It's not a working group now, for what it's worth.
Yeah, the mailing list hasn't been changed, but yes, it's a SIG.
Also, just Brendan, huge thanks for actually starting this, shepherding it through, taking the feedback from Stephen, realizing you needed to iterate. This is phenomenal. Thanks a bunch.
Yeah, I second that. And Brendan, have you thought about at what frequency we're going to repeat the survey?
I'm leaning towards 6 months. I would love to do it more frequently, but I feel like survey fatigue will set in if we try and do it more frequently than 6 months.
I agree with that.
But I feel like if we do it every year, it's not enough of a signal to do directional change. So we'll try it again at 6 months, and if we get the same number of people responding, we'll keep doing it at that interval. Yeah.
Thanks again so much. I know people are eager to see that analysis and the data, and there's lots of plus ones for doing the survey every 6 months. So with that, if there are no other questions, we'll continue the meeting. Let's talk about the week of KubeCon and the week after. So we decided to cancel the March 30th meeting due to KubeCon and Cloud Native Con. And the question now is, do we want to have a meeting-free week after KubeCon again, which is the same thing that we did after the Seattle KubeCon? Do we have any thoughts here?
I'm hugely in favor of this as long as the release is actually cut on time. If the release is not cut on time, I think we should have meetings until the release is actually cut.
Including the week of KubeCon?
I really hope the release doesn't, stagnate until the week of KubeCon.
Right.
But if that's what it takes, yeah, the right people involved in that release should be present in meetings to make sure it gets out the door, right?
Yeah, and this is also why I missed KubeCon Europe last year. 1.2.
All right. So people are in agreement there. Sarah, do you have anything to add? No? Okay.
I think there's the lots of effort to be put in the burn down meetings and the SIGs to try to get us back on track.
Sounds good. Okay, so with that, we'll just go into notices. There is a Kubernetes Day on May 2nd at the OpenStack Summit in Boston. CFPs are open until March 20th. So if you're interested, go check that out. Boston's a pretty cool place. There's also some opportunities for international travel, or maybe not international travel if you're not American, to present at CNCF-sponsored events, such as the Open Source Summit in Tokyo, which is May 31st to June 2nd, and ContainerCon/LinuxCon/Cloud Open, which is in Beijing on June 19th and goes till June 20th. And the CFPs for China are open until March 18th. reach out to the events team if you have any content for either of those. And there's also travel funding available for women and other underrepresented minority speakers. I think that's it for the agenda. So does anybody have any other items they'd like to talk about or announcements they'd like to make?
I just pinged Brandon about the governance meeting that he was scheduling for conversations, and he thinks he had it scheduled for the next 2 Mondays. So he will find that note and bounce it back to the top of our inboxes. And then we can add it into the notes when we have specifics.
Yeah, could we, I believe that it is right that the next 2 Mondays were proposed. Could we get a calendar invitation for that? Otherwise, I will never be able to keep track of it.
You and me both. Do we want to invite all of Kubernetes dev to it?
I don't know. Or we could create a new list just for these meetings and invite Kubernetes dev to join
participate
if they're interested.
Okay. That seems a little more sane, or possibly using the burn down group. Not burn down?
Yeah, I don't know if it's the same
overlap. Okay. Then we will make another group.
All the groups.
All the groups, right. I think it's more than 50 now, for the record.
That's crazy and awesome. All at the same time. Okay, does anybody have anything else they'd like to bring up? I'll give it another 5 seconds of silence.
Yeah, a lot of people are next this week, so I think ending early is good. At upcoming meetings, I'll give updates on progress of the Kubernetes architectural description and layers, performance and such.
So I guess I have one quick thing, just because I don't know how clearly it's been communicated, but per the last 1.6 burn down meeting, if your issue or pull request is in the v16 milestone, it is considered a release blocker. That's the only thing we're looking at. We're not looking at priority labels. We're not looking at the release blocker label. We're just looking at whether or not your thing is in the v16 milestone or not. And so we're going to start to get a little more vocal about whether or not it actually belongs in the v16 milestone. The meetings start to go daily next week, I think. So just, I don't know, addending on to Dan's update.
I think that makes a lot of sense. If it would be less confusing to get rid of the release blocker label, I can easily delete it. Let me know.
There are only like 4 issues that do it, and when we talked about it, we're just not going to look at it. It's either it's in the milestone or it's not in the milestone. That's the only thing we're looking at right now.
Just curious what the motivation is. I mean, intuitively, it sounds like one would want to be able to have.
The motivation is that there are currently priority/critical urgent, priority/important soon, but there's also priority/P0, priority/P1. It's kind of unclear what the documented process refers to. It's unclear what the tooling actually pays attention to. So since we're kind of in flux and we're just sort of trying to simplify, we're just going to look at what's in v16 or not. And
okay, I understand. So this is a temporary situation. I mean, it seems like a bad idea not to be able to have things be.
Quentin, please show up to the next burn down meeting and take that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, I'm actually not part of the release team. I'm just like, that was a thing that I asked at the release burn down meeting, and that's the answer that I got. And I don't know if it's documented, so I figured it would be worth broadcasting here real quick.
Almost certainly the correct thing is not documented, and the tools are definitely not consistent with the direction that we want to go. I think at the end of the release cycle, the milestone needs to necessarily have a more narrow meaning than at the beginning of the milestone, when people are just starting to work on stuff and they're not sure what's going to land and what's not at this point. Unless it really needs to be in 1.6, it doesn't belong in the milestone anymore. So I think that approach makes sense to me.
I will say that right now there are 170 issues in the milestone with no owner. And so it seems unlikely that those are really being investigated. It seems like assigning an owner now would be wise. And if we can't figure out an owner, we need to figure out what to do with those issues.
Yeah, that gets to the heart of my concern, is that without some way of prioritizing things, it's not practical to actually treat all of those equally.
Right. So I would encourage all of you who are concerned about this to show up at the release burn down meeting tomorrow. It is an open invitation, and if you have any questions about where to find this invitation, you're welcome to ping me or ping Kubernetes Dev or ping perhaps the Kubernetes Milestone Burn Down Google group, because that's the policy as far as I've heard. Okay.
All right, thank you. All right, well, have a great afternoon, evening, or morning, wherever you are, and we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you all. Happy Thursday.
Bye.